Hey, hello everyone. We are live. Nice to see you. Nice to see you joining, because we are still 4 seconds in or some seconds in joining with our live stream. So it's nice to see you. This is stream number 7 of Code Review podcast or stream or whatever you call it. We call it podcast for no reason. Uh, but but yeah, it's a podcast. So yeah, welcome. Should we do the introductions? You can start, Mike. I always start. We can do the lucky 7 starting by you.
Sure. Yeah. Mike Cataldo, working at a company called Lattice, previously at Cypress as a DX engineer. And I've been an ambassador for a long time, since I think when they got into public beta. But yeah,
Oh, nice.
based out of Utah, and happy to be here with all of you.
Thanks for the lovely introduction. So my name is Philip. Hey everyone, nice to see you. Oh, we got people joining. That's sweet. Uh, nice to see you all. So yeah, my name is Philip. I'm a Cypress ambassador. I am now sort of a educator, online educator. I teach Cypress. Basically, I actually made a new bio for myself thanks to Andy Knight, who visited not long ago, and finally I think I got nailed what I actually do. So yeah, I teach testers about web development, and I teach developers about testing. So that's what I do. That's what I'm here for, and hopefully we'll learn something new today. So while you all keep joining, I think we got the introductions pretty much nailed, right?
Yeah.
So so yeah, I guess we should start to our first segment, which we always do. I kind of feel like we already could have a jingle, like a screen or something like some transition going
A
on.
transition.
What's new
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Cyprus?
That sounds good. Let's work on that.
Yeah. You got it ready, right? Uh, or should I
Change
uh,
log.
should I spin up the change log, or do you have it? Sorry, I don't see
I've
your
got it.
screen.
I've
You
got
got
it.
it. All right. So let's.
Let's
Oh yeah, you
yeah,
do got it. Let's share it.
you just have to share it. Yep.
Yeah, we can already see.
Cool.
So we got the changelog and 10.11. So
Mhm.
yesterday we got surprised with a
Yesterday, yep.
with a new update, because we talked on Monday, right? And if you
Yeah.
want to know, everyone who's listening, so me and Mike, we prepare for these. That means we
Prepare.
meet two
Yeah.
days before. We spend like 45 minutes talking about our lives and kids and whatnot, and then we spend like 5 minutes preparing for this one. So yeah, we prepared just for a
More than
single. All
5 minutes.
right, well, maybe
We
10.
we we do a good amount of time. But yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we prepared for a single release, and yesterday there was another one. So, oh my God, we will be improvising. We never done that, right?
Yep. Yep. Well, let's start with 10 first. 10.10.
Yep.
Um and then yeah, I mean there really isn't much. I don't think there's much in the latest one, but we'll see. But yeah, just a small change to sci.origin, and yeah, it looks like no longer watch files when executing component tests in run mode. I don't have too much experience with executing component tests in run mode and watching files. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
anything that
So it
I
seems
think
like
is life changing, but
I think for like a couple of last months, every release that was out there sort of had some of changes on the session and origin and component testing. Like these two are still like in experimental mode, they're being heavily worked on at the moment, and it feels nice to see the progress. And I think like general availability should be coming really, really soon. So it's
Yeah.
nice to see there's a progress there.
Mm-hmm. Looks like there were also some issues with Angular that are now resolved. That pretty much wraps that up. So 10.11, let's see.
Oh, we got
Auto
a
session
big
is
one. Yeah.
when using WebKit. So I didn't actually know that was even a limitation. So if you're running WebKit, you can't actually use sci.session. I didn't know that
Yeah, that was.
previously.
I think I saw that when WebKit came out. That was one of the limitations. Honestly, seeing this, this kind of made me happy because I thought like that's like a limitation that will always be there, and it seems it's not, which is great because Apple being Apple and having everything closed and having and basically having everything closed. I thought that this might be a problem. Like this might be something that will not ever be done. But I guess you can. So this is some good news.
Cool. That's awesome. So improving user experience when connecting a project to the dashboard. Users will be prompted to connect a project to the dashboard when logging in from the Launchpad. And
Oh yeah, so this is like also
record runs to the dashboard.
This is like also quite aligned with the changes. Like a couple of last changes, I feel like they have always been like around the component testing, about Origin, but also the dashboard improvements, sort of like merging of the dashboard and the Cypress app. I think it's more and more apparent. Although I don't know what these are. Maybe we could take a look, but don't know if those are like big changes or just a smaller improve user experience. I guess there's not too much to look at, right? Oh, so you opening the thing here.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what if there's anything to see. But yeah, anyone that's interested, I think can look through this, but I don't know if we want to go that route or not. Let's see.
Yeah, I guess it might be a little bit too much.
There it is.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much wraps it up, right?
Yeah.
For the changelog. Yeah, so slower changelog today. Not too many changes. But yeah, I guess what we can bring up, what we can give spotlight to, is definitely the pace that the updates have been coming through, which is really nice. I always seen the Playwright team kind of having a steady pace with the updates, and now seeing Cypress basically since the version 10 came out. They have been really steady with releases and bringing something new every once in a while. It's awesome. By the way, I'm not sure how much I can share in terms of like what's coming. Although I think I can share pretty much anything that's basically out there. So not sure if you remember, but last time we talked about Cypress being more transparent with what is their roadmap. They actually shared publicly their roadmap, and you can see basically the Kanban board, or what is it? And they show basically what they will be working on, what is considered, what is planned. Sort of like you were a product manager at Cypress, and you can just take a look into what's being worked on, which is pretty nice. And one of the changes that are coming is something called V8 snapshots. Honestly, I don't have like a mental image behind this, and but those snapshots, if you can make it a little bigger, we can take a closer look. Basically, those V8
S-
snapshots are going to make
Is that on this?
one huge change.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got
yeah. I
the Cypress
think
app priorities, but I don't see that particular one in here.
it's actually the in progress, the second card, the improved startup time and release reduce time to unzip. Yeah. So yeah,
Gotcha.
this is like a huge deal. So basically, Cypress is working on faster installation and faster opening of Cypress. So Cypress Run and Cypress Open, they basically are going to open browser instantaneously. And I've heard some percentages going around, but I know I shouldn't be sharing that. But I tried to conduct my own experiment into how big of an improvement that was. So I not forked, I downloaded like a pre-release version of Cypress with these V8 snapshots with basically these improvements, and the results were quite good. Honestly, I didn't take a look
Wow.
into the installation because I couldn't like have a proper way of measuring that. But what I wanted to see, not sure if you remember, but there was this Cypress versus Playwright match, but the first one that was I think that was like beginning of the year, February, March, don't remember, but or was it in May, June? Honestly, I don't know.
It was
But
several months ago. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
but
remember
the
exactly.
first one, because
Yeah,
we had a
round one.
rematch, but the round one, and within the round one, there was this like comparison of speeds, and
Mm-hmm.
Playwright basically won that like it was nothing because it had like execution
Yeah.
times of like 5, 6, 7 seconds, something like that. And Cypress was just lagging behind with like 24 seconds and 21 and times like that. So that was like when people got to vote. I think it was pretty brutal. Only a couple of people voted Cypress, which is yeah, they're basically I guess fans. But I got to play with that because I got the repository on my computer. I think it's public, so anyone can actually take a look at that. But I took a look into the repository. I installed the pre-release version and made a comparison there, and they basically are on par. So Cypress was
With
like,
Playwright.
yep, Cypress was like 6, 7 seconds. Playwright was like 5, 6 seconds. So it's pretty much like a second
Yeah.
difference. But yeah, just going
Cool.
from 25 to 6 or 7 or something like that. Like I ran it a couple of times. Sometimes it was 6, sometimes it was 7, sometimes it was 8. Like it really depends. And yeah, I mean, what a what an improvement. Uh, so yeah, that put a big smile on my face.
Yeah. Well, that's huge. I mean, I think it's safe to say that most of us would probably expect Cypress to take a little bit longer to load,
Mhm.
right? Because there is a lot more going on than with Playwright, from where I'm sitting anyway, that's what it looks like, right? I mean, there's the Electron app, and there's a lot of things going on. You know, it's not as I think bare bones as the Playwright runner, as I see it.
Mhm.
So I think, I think a lot of us would accept that cost, right, for additional features, but to say that they're both now running at about the same speed as far as the startup is awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's no
So
longer yeah,
so basically, like with the
cool.
previous measurement, I think it was the startup and loading of the tests and basically took the bigger part of the test. Like the test execution itself wasn't that slow, right? It was okay, but the startup time and basically like the whole process of like injecting the files into the browser and making them run, that was like taking a lot of time. obviously too
Hmm.
much time. And as I mentioned, as the ticket mentions, there were also some improvements on like the installation itself. So the whole package should be smaller or download it faster. I don't know. The whole
Yeah,
installation, I
bundle all the
believe.
modules.
Yep.
Yeah,
So like
and then there's an yeah,
the
there's
binary
some
installation and everything
transpiling.
should be yeah much faster. So looking forward to that, and
Yeah,
that should be coming like
cool.
I think with the next major release. And if you take a look into to the planning again, like to the board again, then another one. Ooh,
Whoops.
what happened there?
That's this
Oh, you took a
tech
look into the
briefs.
document.
It's an internal. I think it's an internal thing
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
I
I
don't have
clicked on that
access
too
to it.
yesterday. I guess that's
All right,
internal. We cannot see that. I don't even have the
let's
privileges
go.
as a Cyprus ambassador. So yeah, the second thing in progress. Not sure if we talked about this one, but there is the requery elements are found detached from DOM. So like in
That's big.
that's going to take a whole chapter out of my workshop because because I explain like how you have a should command and that should command makes the previous command retry, and how it makes only the previous command retry, not the whole chain. As far as I
Yeah,
understand this is going to change that, and it's basically going to rerun the whole chain. So this is huge news, because if you're running like to if you're having problems with the detached from DOM errors and stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
then basically you have uh, you this should be history.
It shows it right here. Yeah, so like currently when Cypress queries an element that was passed from a parent element, say in get, click, or find, if the element at some point becomes detached from the DOM, we throw an error.
Yep.
And then this is the error. And anybody that's familiar with this probably cringes at the sight of this error. I know I do, because it's
Well,
just
everybody saw that.
absolutely like it's terrible, and it's so difficult. I mean, some depending on why it's detached and things, there's ways around it. I've been able to, relatively speaking, yeah, in general, I've been able to find a way around it, but it's still a pain in the butt
Yeah.
to do. And yeah, so this is great. So yeah, really, users just want to requery the DOM for the previously found element and click on the new element, because it's more often than not the framework underneath has created a completely new DOM element and inserted it into the DOM. Yeah, that's so true. That's
Yep.
usually what's happening. Is just a re-render is happening in the process of you interacting with your application. So the proposal is to requery the previously found element, continue the command with any new found elements.
Yep.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's great.
it's
So
a
is
great
it?
change,
So
and I think this is also like coming with one of the upcoming major releases. So I don't remember anymore if this is going to be version 11 or version 12, but something like that. Like the big feature that's coming, it's going to be the one. Oh, we got a great question
that's
from
cool.
Chow. He's asking, how is that different from retries as a setup in Cypress configuration? Which is a great question. Thanks for pointing that out. So the
Hmm.
retries that you set up in the configuration are basically like the test retries. If so, you get your test, it starts somewhere, does its thing, and it fails somewhere, whether it's on assertion or something didn't load or request return the 404 error or something like that. Uh, Basically, the test is failed and is going to retry. So the how many times that test is going to try to retry and pass, that's determined in the Cypress configuration. That's the Cypress config.js or TS if you're in TypeScript. Um, The thing we are now salivating over is the DOM requerying. So let's say you have an element, right? So you get an element, and let's say that element is rendered thanks to an HTTP request, right? So let's say you have a list of items and you want to get a list of items. But that list of items it's retrieved from a server by an HTTP request. So you get me this list and server responds and front end will like render the whole list. So what can happen is that you get an item from that list, and for some reason there's another get request that's going to ask the server to get you the information, and when that comes, it will re-render the whole view, and the element that you caught with your get command would basically stop existing because your front end might work in this way that it will just throw away everything and update the table or the list with the data that it just received. So yeah, depending on how your command chain is working, you might get to this detached error. There are ways of how you can mitigate that error from happening, but they're not something that's widely used. Simply, you have to do a little digging in the documentation, understand how retriability and chaining works, and how they relate to one another. And the thing is that it's not really intuitive. You can find your way around it, but it's not really intuitive. And oftentimes, even like a skilled Cypress tester is going to forget about it and just find it on the CI when there's a flaky test and they need to like make it more stable. So that's what changes. Basically, now it will be more intuitive, and you should be getting less of those detached from DOM errors or any other errors that are connected to like the DOM re-rendering and changing its content.
Yeah.
So
And it's not the same as reloading the page, right? So it's like it's unbeknownst to the user that it's totally invalid. So it doesn't really make sense when this happens. I can kind of understand, like, I mean, I know at first, like, I was wondering, like, what the heck is this detached, garbage? Like, what's happening here? And because as far as the app is concerned, and you watch the recording and you see everything looks normal, but yeah, things can kind of yeah, when a re-render happens, it's kind of invisible, or maybe not invisible, but it's hard to catch
yep.
if at all. Sometimes it's something that's re-rendering that's maybe not even visible yet, and you're grabbing it and something's changing in it. Yeah. So it's tricky all around to get through it. So this is definitely huge. Yeah, we're definitely salivating over this one, and it's in progress, right?
Yeah, it's in
It's in
progress. It's
progress.
actively being worked on. I
Yay.
had my eyes on the pull request and the issues that are connected to that for a couple of weeks, and you can see like that being updated all the time. So hats off to everyone in Cypress who's working on it. It's awesome seeing that. We got another question. It feels like maybe we can have the Chow get the napkin ready. We'll make sure. Thanks for that. We got another question. It looks like we might have a couple of those today, which is awesome because we don't have to think about the content. But yeah, we can turn this into Q&A. And Milan is asking a good question here. So, do you think Cypress will support new window and new tab eventually? So far, Playwright did it much better, so I'm wondering. I can actually answer that, but if you want to jump into it, I'm not going to get in the way.
Yeah. Um, I don't know what their plans are, but as far as I know, I mean, I think that with and maybe I'm ignorant, but I don't think that supporting a new window or tab is super important just because most of the time, if you have a new window coming up, you could, rather than writing a test that goes through that entire flow, you can just go to that new window, visit that new page, because really when you're testing the flow, say you click on something and that opens a new window, you do something and that opens a new window, um, you're just ensuring that the browser is working, right? Or
Mhm.
some very simple mechanism is working. So the risk there of just testing that window, that new tab or that new window separately is pretty small. So I would think that unless folks are getting their pitchforks out, I don't think Cypress is going to run to that one and support it. But I'd like to understand, from the community, like what kinds of, and maybe you have something to add to that, like what, are there situations where that has to be tested?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I would add to that, like, just today I sort of I had a thing going on in my head, and I decided to create a YouTube short video, so you can check that on my channel. And basically the thing is, like, uh, it's I start with the thesis that you might it's maybe not the best way to think of Cypress as an automation tool, but it's better to think of it as a testing tool. So there's like a slight difference, and obviously we are talking about test automation, right? So we got both of those worlds, and it's not really unfair to call Cypress test automation tool, but the real question is where that automation happens. And basically, so far with tools like Playwright, WebDriver, Selenium, and other tools, those basically often use the driver to drive the browser. They're basically entering the browser from outside. They're automating the browser. So that's where the automation happens. With Cypress, the automation doesn't happen on the browser. It happens on the application. So Cypress is inside the browser, and that's why there are some problems with automating things like new tab, open a new tab, or I don't know, like change the settings on the browser, or click a download button and see the pop-up window, or see alerts, or prompts and stuff like that. There are ways around that. You can definitely work with that, but it's not in a way you would do that with like a browser automation tool, because you're not automating the browser, you're automating the application. So the thing is, like for me, Cypress is good enough. I think it brings more advantages to be in the browser than being outside of the browser, and we can get into that definitely. But the thing is, like, you always need to draw a line somewhere, right? Because you either automate the application and test the application. So that's why I'm saying Cypress is a testing tool. Um, or you draw the line a level above that and you automate the browser, or you go even higher and you automate the operation system, or you automate the machine that's working on. So you need to draw the line somewhere onto like where are you going to do that automation and what you actually want to test. Now, if you take a look at your application from sort of a browser perspective, browser from the developer perspective. So imagine you're a developer writing an app. If you want something to open a new tab, basically you need to write a code that's going to call the browser API. It's going to call it to, hey, open me a new tab and open this URL, and that's it. Like, there's nothing else happening on the second tab. It's opening a URL, so you're sending your user to some link. You're just giving it the information the URL that it's supposed to open. Like that's all. That's all you can do with the browser API in terms of opening a new tab. And you can choose to open it in new window or new tab or in the window itself. So that's why, like when you see the solution, invoke remove attribute of target blank, it's a good solution actually. Like looking at it from the perspective of the developer and looking at it from the perspective of the front end logic. Hopefully, I explained that. But basically, sorry, I'm with this on mic. I don't think Cypress is ever going to implement the new tab or new window. And the reason is that you basically just don't need it. If you are okay with drawing the line of what you want to automate at the application level. If you're not okay, if you are firmly standing on the position that you need to automate the browser, then basically Cypress is not a tool for you, and you might have your reasons for that. But I'm trying to always like look from the developer perspective on the application, even though I would still consider myself a tester.
Yeah, I think also though sorry, did you have another comment?
No, sorry.
Well, I think this is also from a tester perspective too, because the true tester, at least my definition, what I'm passionate about is assessing risk, right? And deciding, because I don't just test everything, right? Part of my job is not just testing, it's also determining what actually should be tested.
Mhm.
And so when we have a limitation like this that we come across where, okay, it's not going to test it in a new browser, it definitely forces us to get our engineering hats on from a developer and a tester perspective and think, okay, first, is this even worth the like, is this a high enough risk where it's worth testing in the first place? When I click on this link, this is going to happen. Am I really testing my application, or am I just testing that the browser is working, right?
Yep.
Like it should. So I think we need to be keeping that frame of mind all the time, not just when we come across the limitation of Cypress, but even just in general. If we have the ability to test it, doesn't mean that we should. We should be taking a step back and thinking. In the past, I've actually caught myself pretty much saying that the best way to use Cypress is to not use it at all. And that is like for end to end in particular. There's a lot of times where I'm actually spending a lot more time saying, no, we're not going to test that with Cypress than I am, saying, yeah, we're going to test that, because I'm constantly thinking, okay, is this something that's worth the cost? Are we getting a return on our investment with this particular test? So yeah, I think it's a testing and a tester and a dev discipline that's involved.
Yeah, Milan, thank you again for bringing that question. I think it's an important one to have answered, because I think like Cypress definitely brought some novelties into the testing world, and I think it's worth stopping and just trying to examine. All right, so Cypress is really popular, but why? How can it be popular if it made these? If you have these limitations, and it's really good to talk about the reasons why those limitations are there, and why is it okay that they're there. So there's no like perfect tool. There are definitely always some trade-offs. In my mind, I think those trade-offs make a huge sense. But yeah. So again, thank you for that question. We got a couple of questions here. Should we? Oh, we got Danny from Colombia. Hello, nice to meet you. And we got a question from Vasil. So, do you think there's going to be a UI performance metrics introduced with some plugins or by Cypress itself in order to provide a better visibility to the performance of the UI. Oh, that's a good one. So as far as the performance goes, I think Cypress Docs actually mentioned that it's not really useful to test Cypress to use Cypress for like performance testing. And I would argue that on one hand they are right, but there are some things you can do. The thing why I guess they don't encourage people to use Cypress for performance testing is that when you open a site, when you open the browser, you with Cypress you also inject Cypress inside the browser. So it's not like your application is the only thing running in that browser, which is different from when you would be running a performance test, right? You just want to run your application there. That being said, so there are tools. There is a plugin, Cypress Lighthouse plugin, which will give you the Lighthouse metrics from Google. So you can use that to check the health of your page. And there, I written a blog some time ago about how you can actually add some measurements to your tests in terms of like, let's say you have a button that will open a modal window and you want to make sure that that modal window will open at some point, right? And you want to measure that and you want to make sure that it will that's I don't know, that like it opens within a certain threshold. You can definitely do that by accessing again the browser's API. So browser actually has an API to access to add these performance markers, and it's basically like hitting a stopwatch, right? You hit start, you hit stop, and then you get that number and try to see if it's below the threshold or it's above. So this is what you can do, but definitely you cannot use it for like load testing where you would like open 10,000 instances and hit do some automation script on your application. That's not really the use case. So again, like talking about performance testing, it really depends like on what you mean by performance testing. So you can do some sort of performance, and I don't see Cypress like implementing something, but again, this is a huge advantage of like the open source community around Cypress, that they can create their own plugins and add something to it. So yeah. Anything you want to add, Mike? Have you tried performance testing with Cypress of any kind?
No, it's never really been a super high priority, but it has been something that I thought about, like how I would go about doing it. And one of the things that you can leverage in Cypress is events. So, and one of the things that I actually wanted to look at was performance um, of our server. So, like, for example, let's just say that I made an API request um, and uh, and it takes 3 seconds for the request to come back, right? Well, with with Cypress events, you can actually hook into that event and say, okay, at this time that a request is made, I want you to start the clock, right? And then at the time that the request stops or the response comes back, I want you to stop the clock. And then I want you to take that request and I want you to compare the time, the performance or whatever, to some baseline,
Hmm.
right? And then the idea with that was that I could basically have a baseline and then set some kind of threshold. And then if it goes beyond that threshold, then I would get some kind of
Yeah.
warning or error or something like that in the test. And then that way I could kind of keep an eye on things because you never know. It's hard to keep an eye on that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, since that point, we actually have had some DevOps guys basically putting in that stuff automatically for us, and we're watching it
Hmm.
all the time on production. So it's not really a concern anymore for that particular kind of performance. But that's my only foray
Yeah.
into it, if you can even call it that.
I think you
But
can do
but
that.
yeah,
I think if you are talking just about like API testing, then you can pretty much do that out of the box with Cypress. With like, so when you hit the request, it will actually bring you back the duration of how long that request took. Not sure if that's
yep.
like part of the response or it's actually a measurement that's being done. I never really thought about that number, like what it actually shows. But
Yeah. Well,
the
I
number
know
might
in
be
the
of
log,
interest. Yeah.
yeah, I think in the log, I think there is a duration. Like if you click on one of those in requests and you look in the log, I think it does show it. If not the request itself, at least the wait, it will show you how long it waited. But yeah, I believe if you hook into that event, the callback will actually return
Hmm.
the the information
Yep.
about that request, including
Yeah, yeah.
its
So you can
yeah.
actually test that. Interesting question we got in the chat. Marcus is asking, what are the good ways of measuring quality of our tests? Which is, I feel like maybe you can elaborate on that question because I really don't know how would I talk about quality of the tests. But if I were to like have a peer review of some tests, if we're strictly talking about test automation, then I would probably take first and foremost take a look into like how well written is that well written, not well written, how readable is that test. Like the readability is
Yep.
like one of the top priorities for tests. Because not only you are supposed to write a test automation, you have to make sure that it's maintainable and that you can actually like if you open that test 1 year later, you're still able to see what it does. If it fails, you know why it failed, and basically that feedback loop from like, all right, test failed, fix the test or find the error should be as short as possible. So that's like, for me, that's the main purpose of the test, to provide you the information. And if it does that quickly, then good. If it doesn't do that quickly, and you need to you need to decipher what's actually happening, then that's no good. So that, I don't think it's a measurement. It's sort of a qualitative measurement, and I think like the measure and quality are sometimes, I'm kind of not sure if those two words belong together. Because if you're taking a look at the quality, I think you're doing a qualitative analysis. If you're doing a measurement, that means you have some units that you can measure, and I don't think there's a unit of quality. But you can take a look at a quality. So so yeah,
Yeah.
and Marcus sort of elaborated on that question. Thank you, Marcus, for that. So yeah, I guess I'm mentioning this because I'm a solo test automation engineer, and I feel like I'm checking devs code, but no one provides feedback for me. Oh, well, we can provide feedback for you. By the way, we named this code review podcast. So if you feel like taking a look in if you feel like getting a feedback on your code, then you can basically go to the Discord channel. Let me just post the link to that in the chat. And there is a code review channel and that's like the initial purpose of that channel. Hey, send us your codes, we'll review that, and we'll go live and review that together and find out what's been done really well, and also maybe give some suggestions on what can be improved. So if you feel like this is something you want, we can help you out with that. And yeah, but it's like one thing I have to point out. It's good that you're looking for a feedback, especially like if you're lonely and don't have too many people reviewing your code. The fact that you're asking for a feedback, I think, is a good sign, and you're on a good way of improving yourself. So hats off to you, Marcus. Continue. You're doing good.
Yep. Awesome. That's awesome. Yep.
So yeah,
what's more important than checking the quality of the quality, right?
Yep.
The quality of the tests are most important. I've always emphasized that. Like, I consider myself a perfectionist when it comes to my code. I guess a lot of passionate engineers can say that, but I think for me, my justification, whether it's legitimate or not, is that, well, my code is testing, who's testing the tester, and so
Exactly.
I have to make sure that I have to ensure that it's top notch, and so yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. So
cool. What other questions do we have?
Not many at this moment. So Marcus's was last. So I guess we can move on to the next matter of discussion, and that's the plugin, right?
Yeah, let's talk about your plugin.
So yeah, big news, everyone. Good news, everyone. I made a plugin. And it's awesome. Basically, what I did is I gave a UI for your API tests. Well, more basically, I saw a good idea and I took my spin on it. So Gleb Bahmuto has made a plugin. I guess I should credit him on the README page as well. But yeah, basically he had a great idea. Hey, how about when you call CY request, then make sure we can see the response and the details of that request on the UI. So he had made a plugin called CY API. It's over here. It looks something like this. And basically, you use this part of the UI to sort of show all the information. So I really like that idea. So what I did, I kind of made my own plugin, which looks like this. It has more colors, but it's also built differently. Because I really liked what Gleb did, but I did try to take my own spin at it. So let me show you what I did. I actually have the. Let me open the code, and I'm going to open the API plugin. Here it is. So let me make this a little bit bigger for you to see. And yeah, so here's like the code base. It's actually on GitHub, so it's not like I'm showing you anything secret. But the thing is, I have this support TS file. And this basically contains the whole code for it. It contains the Cypress commands add, which adds an API command. And it also has a before block in here. Basically, that's it for the plugin. So what Gleb did with his command, he would also add a custom command, add an API, and he would take the the window context of the Cypress runner, and then add a bunch of HTML code in there and have certain logic into like how to add a response there and headers and all kinds of information, etc. So so I thought, all right, so this is interesting, right? We can take a look into the state in here. So let me walk you through that. So we got this get container function, and basically what it does, it calls these two undocumented commands, which are cy state and document and cy state window. Mike, you know this, right? You've been in the Cypress team, and you guys are using these commands all the time, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I didn't really know what this does, but what it does.
Yeah,
So
there's no documentation on it.
there's no documentation on it.
It's
You need
there,
to
but
figure
there's
things
no
on your
docs.
exactly.
Yep.
So basically, I'm taking the document. You know what? Let me run it. Let me just.
And it's synchronous, right?
Uh,
Is it synchronous, or does it return a
it seems
forgot.
it's synchronous since it's since I'm assigning it to a variable. So let me start everything, and I want to show you what's actually happening, like what I'm actually doing with this. All right, so let me just run one of the tests, and I'll arrange my windows a little bit so you can see that. So here I have like a couple of tests, and yeah, so cy state. Let's take a look into that. Here's the. Give me one more second. Just want to have a thing ready. All right, here it is. I can draw on my screen. All right, so I have this cy state command, and that basically is going to return this whole window. That's over here, right? So what I'm doing here is that I'm just adding stuff as a part of this custom command, this cy API. I'm just adding stuff into this window. So, for example, I have a couple of things going on here, and I'm adding some style, some CSS files into that, so I can add my styling. And then, basically what Gleb did, he would take the document, and he would just go and call the inner HTML and add a bunch of stuff in there. And what I decided to do, hey, how about I just mount an application into there? What if I just took this window and just mounted an application in there? And I didn't know if that's possible, but it is. And I was so surprised that this works. And then basically a light bulb showed on the top of my head, and I was like, oh yeah, so actually Cypress is an application for testing your application. And you can actually just treat the whole browser as your environment where you develop and test and do everything. So what I did, I just developed an application that will just mount inside the browser and do things that I wanted to do. So this
Is
app,
that how? I wonder if that's how component testing works.
that's
Like
exactly
under the
how
hood, if
component
that's
testing works, by the way. That's exactly how that works. You know how many revelations I had making this plugin? It's amazing. So
yeah.
so yeah, but I didn't want to. I wanted to. It might have been a little bit easier if I wrote this just for like component testing, but then like the whole hey, let's use this for API testing might have been a little bit more complicated. But yeah, I have mounted my Vue application. So this is like the goal. If you have ever tried to create your application, and it doesn't matter if it was in React or Angular or Vue. Basically, you have this entry point where you mount the application. So this is like the entry point. This is where I mount the application, and basically that application There's this create app. That's for Vue. I'm not going to go too deep into that. But here's like the app. I'm going to create that, and there are these properties. And these properties, imagine it like an object with a certain values. So let's say it has a value of name, and that name is Mike, and then it has something. Basically, it's an object. But what happens with these objects is that whenever I change something about the object, the whole application is going to re-render and show information. So what I did, first of all, I'm mounting this application, and then whenever something happens, let me give you a good example. Look, I call a request, and then I use take different things from here, and what I do is, where do I have something? What would be a good way of showing? I don't know. Oh, basically, okay. So I have this props status. So I take the status from the response of my request command, and then I just change the property that's called status and write it into that object. And it magically gets rendered over here, so you can see the status over here. And then I added some styling, etc. So it's pure magic. And basically what I'm doing here, I have a bunch of components, and these components are written in Vue in like the single filed component syntax. So I have my template, my script in here. It's just beautiful. I had so much fun with this. And I still continue to do so, because like the first iteration of the plugin was it was working, and basically I got tons of suggestions of what should I do. Oh, so we got a question from Milan. What about response body? How does it show? Oh yeah, I can show you, because I have. Oh, this is a nice thing also. So I want to show you this first. So look, I have like the whole repository over here. I have my source code over here, and then I have Cypress tests. So I'm using Cypress to test my Cypress plugin. So instead of like if you install a plugin, you do npm install the plugin, and then you go to your E2E file and import the plugin. So I have like a real Cypress real events in here. So instead of doing the installation, I just have like the reference to the output folder. So it's like 2 levels up, dist and support. So when I don't want to go like too deep, but when you want to like build application for production, then usually you go by npm, but there's like a bundler behind, but you go npm run build, and it does its magic, and it will create this dist folder, and basically you have like the minified code and everything, like the final production code you would have in here. So what I do inside my Cypress tests, I import this dist support file in here instead of like the npm install and everything. So I test like the local version of the plugin. So yeah, I use Cypress to test my plugin. So the question was, what about response body? So let me show you. I think I have the basic methods, syntax, formats. Yeah, let's take a look at the format. So I got like 3 tests in here. And here I have a get, and there's a URL that I call. It gives me status of 200. I guess it's not that visible. Let me make it a little bigger. Yeah, like this. So I got the URL in here, and basically I have the response, and this is like a response body in JSON. I also support like the HTML, so you can take a look at the HTML. If you have an XML, it will show the XML. And the really fun part about this is that you get this copy to clipboard button. So you click on it, it will copy to your clipboard, and you can then use it in your test to make an assertion or something. It's a lot of fun. The only thing, if you have like snapshots, so it supports snapshots, right? So you get these get JSON, you got, and if you hover over the response, it will show you the response. So you can take a look into what happened while we were sending the request and what happened while we were when the response has come back. And then also we have copy buttons, syntax. So it supports like the same syntax. It works with session. That was something I needed to fix. Then I have like the retries. I wanted to make sure that they work. It doesn't work. Okay, I guess I got some fixing to do. I don't know. Then a 301 format. I think I wanted to test something, show you something, but I forgot what it was. Never mind. So yeah. Basically, that's it. So Milan is asking, is there a reason why to use my over Glebs plugin? Is it just looks wise? Yeah, Glebs plugin is it has a feature that I don't have, and that's like showing some debug information from the server. So there's a way of adding some sort of debug mode into your server, and when you have it, basically you have some kind of logs that you can display on this UI. I don't have that. I do have the copy to clipboard thing, and I have some nice colors, and that's about it. And I have an interest of like working on this and making it even better. And also Vasil has asked, do you have a flag parameter in order to disable it in specific E2E cases when where we use REST requests? So basically, I'll show you the test. The test is using CY API. So if you just want to use, don't want to use this UI, you change this to request. So it's like it's a whole another command. So if you use request, it's not going to be used. If you use API, you get this printout to the view, and that's about it.
So what if someone were to mix requests? I mean, not requests, but commands, like doing a sci.request or visiting a page. What if somebody visited a page and then did a sci.api? What would happen?
So we will go for a testing session. Let's do our, all right, so let's do
why not?
CY visits. What should we visit, Mike?
Why don't you visit your website? Or
okay.
or something.
All right, let's do philiprees.com. Hope that's up. Let's do API. Let's just call it the default. So I have like a server running in the background. And let's do test. Here it is. All right, so it will delete the whole view. I expected that, by the way. So you cannot see my page anymore. It will just remove it from the view. So what if we did it in reverse order, right? That would be the next question. That's what I'm curious about, at least. All right, so we removed the view from the API view from our page. But if I hover over, I can still look at it if I need to. So here's my response body, and here's my page. Okay, I think that works, right?
Yeah. Well, if somebody wanted to, mix it up, that's good. That they can do that.
Oh yeah, Jakub actually pointed out that you can only clipboard only works for the last test and not in snapshots, which is a good point to make. right? So I have this copy to clipboard button, but if I go to the snapshot, I cannot add it. I cannot copy it. It doesn't show because it's a snapshot, right?
Oh, because it's a snapshot, right?
But I thought of an idea
Right.
of how that could be solved. So I can, as a part of this snapshot, I'm going to basically create an invisible element that's going to contain this whole information. And I'm going to add a button to the Cypress UI that's going to be interactive. And I think it could work. I need to explore that. But I thought I'm just going to take the... So we are in the browser, right? So I can access anything I want. I have access to this timeline, right? I've changed the colors for this get request. And that was just a CSS. But I'm pretty sure I can go up here and just take the content of the current snapshot, click on the button, and take out its contents. I'll need to explore that, but I'm pretty sure I should be able to do that. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, what if you were to just show it in the log? So just have it, or do you already do that?
Oh, I already
In
do
other
that.
words,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I can.
So that way you could just copy it from there.
Yeah, I can copy it from there. I can even copy it from here. It's the same thing, right?
You
It
just
is
don't
the
have the
same thing.
button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't have the button, and the button is the magic,
Yeah.
So yeah, this has been like a lot of fun, and I learned quite a lot. Basically, the biggest revelation for
Yeah.
me was the fact that I can mount like a whole application in the UI, which again, it just sparked so many ideas. Like I can do anything with this. So we are in the browser, we can play with that. We can, if you're a developer and if you are already inside the browser, you can just do anything you like and be able to ship it as a plugin. It's so much fun. Yeah. So yeah, Cypress, way to go. Like the last time we talked about Cypress and being able to have plugins. And that, well, we were on the Cypress versus Playwright rematch kind of thing. Someone pointed out that plugins are not a good way. We want to keep the testing tool as lean as possible, or like with batteries included, which is absolute nonsense, right? The biggest power of Cypress is actually in the plugins, and that you can actually create your own thing and add to the community and add to the to the whole goodness of the testing. And I think the history has definitely shown that there are so many good plugins, and some of them started to be like implemented right inside Cypress. So like a missing functionality of I think file download from no, wait, not download, upload. Upload was something that was kind of problematic, with choosing the file and uploading. That's the whole thing about accessing something from within the browser and not from outside the browser, right? But there was a plugin that could solve that for you. And then with version, I don't know, 7 or something, it got implemented right into the code base, which is awesome. If a plugin becomes popular, it can become part of the whole solution, which is great. More power to open source.
That's cool. Yeah, there's a I'm looking at one of the plugins is called Cypress iframe.
Oh yeah.
And it contains custom commands for interacting with iframes. And going back to where we were before with the what do you call it, the roadmap, there's actually one in the planned column for iframe support.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. Wait, let me share it. Got it.
That would be an inspiration for that. I don't know. I don't know if there's any.
Honestly, don't know. I think I looked into the code base of that plugin, and basically, I don't want to. I don't want to like. Not sure if I look at this plugin or it was some other, but basically I took a look into a plugin that had the iframe solution, and I think what it does, it switches the iframe, switches the focus from the iframe that you're currently at, because you're running testing in iframe, when you're testing the application, and it switched the focus with just like a bunch of custom commands inside. So I think
Hmm.
maybe the solution might be similar, but what I think is going to be implemented as well is like the whole snapshot thing for Cypress. I think that's why they're kind of hesitant, because the solution is there. Like you can switch iframes even without the plugin. You just need to make it on your own, and yeah, and you can totally do that. But with the native support, I think they want to go a little bit further, and obviously they needed to sort the third party, the origin thing first. And if you want to test, for example, like your payment iframe or something like that, because that's like the 99% of the usage. I think
Hmm.
that's what they needed to solve first, and iframes, obviously being part of the roadmap, are coming really soon. Hopefully, we won't have to wait too much, but honestly, I've been able to do like 99% of the testing without these, and I think it's not going to like change my life upside down when it comes. But yeah, I mean, as is always said, it depends, right? You might need that,
Yeah.
you might not need that. It really depends on what you are testing, which company you are in, and what are the needs, what are the biggest risks. But in terms of like what are the biggest risks, it feels like it needs to be added that probably the biggest risks are connected to the application you are testing and not like the third party integration. But I
Yep.
don't know. Maybe there are. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't want to step on
Yeah.
anyone's toes with this statement. So sorry about that. I love to learn if if this is actually a problem for you, and it's stopping you from implementing whether Cypress, or it's making your testing hard. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I think that between the Cypress team and even individuals on the team and us, like we only have so much perspective, on what the needs of the community are. We can only speak from our own experience and in talking with with the community. And so it
Yes.
requires, I think, in part, it requires the community to come out and say, "Hey, I have this problem. It affects me and it affects, other people too." And as you continue to see that pattern, um, then something can actually be done about it. And so what better way to communicate that need than by creating a plugin? Because then what that does is that obviously it helps you, um, but it helps the other people that are affected by this, and then its usage is an indication or proof to um, the holy ones at Cyprus that, hey, this is something that's really necessary, that's needed, and should be part of the native um, thing, and then they can kind of improve on that if necessary. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
can,
totally true. Like the voice of the community, I think it's being heard. It's not always fast, but it is being heard. So I think at the end of the
mhm,
day, even like the biggest pains that are out there are going to be considered. Like some are obviously roadblocks because of the architecture. Honestly, I thought like the third party, the whole origin thing was out of the discussion. but it seems like it is doable. So I think if the community voices their concerns, Cypress team is going to consider. And I really like this. Like this is the power of like the open source product that will listen to its community, as opposed to maybe some like solution backed by a giant corporation or something like that may be more interested in like having the profits. But I didn't want to like suggest anything by that. Just giving an example. Like if you need to um, have some kind of results for some stakeholders, etc. I think that puts a lot of pressure on you, as opposed to like being driven by the community. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, to be totally fair, Cypress does have investors. They do have a paying product, but I guess that's more of a concern for the dashboard than for the Cypress runner itself. But we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, 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 and I think it's obvious through the change logs too. You can see there's a lot of improvements to Cypress core,
Mm-hmm.
and those improvements precede the improvements to the dashboard. In other words, it's not like they create the dashboard and they profit from the dashboard and then the runner copies that. It's kind of the other way around.
Yep.
Those things are kind of brought into the dashboard, and the dashboard kind of coalesces with the runner and things like that. It's so there. It's obvious where the priorities are. So that's good. So kind of backing up a little bit about, just like API testing.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on, like, how do I know when I should be testing my API, in particular using your plugin? Like, do you see a particular like use case, and like how do I, we talked about this a little bit before when we were preparing for this. We talked about like structuring, and we don't have to get into a big thing with project structure, but I guess like how does this how does API testing kind of fit into the bigger picture?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're bringing up a good point here. So the question about so for example, let's take the plugin, right? So why even have a plugin like this? And I think the answer is simple. I even have it in like the marketing punchline of the plugin is it's like Postman but in Cypress. It's definitely not Postman in Cypress, but it resembles Postman, but only in the terms like you have the visual feedback of that HTTP request, because you can do HTTP request in a terminal. You don't need anything in that for that. So why do we use Postman? Why is Postman so popular? Well, basically because it provides you a visual feedback, and you can examine and you can take a deeper look and you can analyze. It's the same reason why we have Cypress open mode, right? Why do we have that whole runner thing? Because we need a visual feedback to see our application behave in certain ways. So the API plugin is basically the missing part of the whole visual story, because you can take a look into the console, you can see everything there, but also you may want to examine what's going on in your UI without opening the console. So that's why the plugin. And in terms of like how does it fall in the whole in like the bigger picture, I think if you are already using Cypress for end-to-end testing and you might be using it for end-to-end testing, it might make a lot of sense to use it for API testing as well, right? So if you have like a whole team of developers and they're using Cypress, they're very happy about that, And then we got a bunch of backend developers. Hey, what you got going on over there? And you can tell them, oh, you can use this for API testing as well. And you get this nice visual feedback, so you can actually see what's going on. You can examine that, and you can write your test easily. So I can maybe show you, right? Because if we, so we were playing with that test over here. So what I was doing is I was calling an API, and that API is going to give me a response, right? I can see that response. I can see the status. I can see the response body, and how easy it is now to write a test for that. So let's just take a look at its status. It should equal 200, and boom, we got a test. We actually made an assertion that it should work like this. That's sweet. How about we go a little deeper? Well, we can just go then, and then write a callback. Oops. And then, I don't know, destructure whatever we need. You want to take a look at the duration. You want to take a look at the status test, redirects. You want to take a look at the body. Hey, we can take a look at the body. So we want to expect body, what we got there, string to equal string, right? And we see it all in here. It gives us clue into what we want to test and what can we expect with our testing. I think it makes the whole testing a little bit easier, to navigate. So I think the whole idea is about like giving you a visual feedback, because it might help you navigate through. And cool. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, we got some more questions, by the way, but not sure if you wanted to ask a little more about that, or was that a good enough answer?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think maybe in a future one we can talk about, as a potential kind of separate, discussion is like where to prioritize or how to prioritize these kinds of tests. Like, in other words, the need for an API test. What's the heuristic around that? Should I have an API test? What are some because many times you're testing your API indirectly by testing your application. So one question could be like, should you, instead of testing your API with Sci.API, should you just be looking at what your coverage is, your API coverage, so to speak, with your end-to-end tests, and you can certainly use plugins to, if one doesn't already exist, to kind of analyze that and see, okay, which of all these, especially if you have like an API doc or API spec, you could probably compare it to that and see, okay, I've got 30 endpoints, of all my tests. Am I testing all of those, all of those endpoints? And then even in that, an end-to-end test, you can say, okay, I want to make sure that when I do this on the UI, that this particular request is being made, and then I want to look at the response from that request and ensure that the body looks like this, that it has this information in it, and so on and so forth. And so I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but I just wanted to, kind of explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're making a good point. If you're doing an end-to-end test, you are hitting your APIs nevertheless. However, the focus might be a little bit different. So you might want to write like a functional test that will give you the proper results. Now, being aware of what APIs are being called and being aware of what's actually happening on the API front is really good. And to have it integrated into your test, maybe even to combine a UI and API test with intercept to catch an HTTP request being called and then check for its response bodies. I think that's a good approach. It might be. Wait, I'll get to that point later because it might create some problems. But also, with solely focusing on API testing, you might be interested in some of the information that may not be visually available to you while you are writing an end-to-end test. So, for example, we had a really nice case back in Slido where we would change a resource from ID to UID, and ID is a string. It's a number, right? But UID was a string, and that change it was prepared on the API before it was released to be used with the front end. But we didn't catch the bug that the front end wasn't able to handle those UIDs. And we would be able to find it if we were, for example, testing our APIs, I don't know, like against JSON schemas, or maybe try it out against some assertions on just solely on the API. That, oh, this is something that has changed. I mean, I don't know, maybe we wouldn't have it catch either, because we would just update the test to pass and then release it to front end, and it would cause problems. But yeah. So the other thing, the point where it might be tricky to combine UI and API test, and don't get me wrong, I think in general it's a good idea, and I'm doing it, and I think it provides me some good feedback and provides me some good value. But the tricky thing might be when there is a change that is not really affecting the test, the behavior of the application, and I'm not really interested in that, but it makes the test fail. An example might be status codes. So you can just throw a 200 status code to any response, right? So you don't necessarily want to distinguish between 201, 202, 204. Like you are a backend developer and you just throw 200 for everything that's a non-error, right? However, then you decide, all right, maybe we want to have that API public. Maybe it's good that we follow some standards, so let's apply them. And let's add a 202 status code for this case, 204 for this case, etc. So when that change is implemented, your UI tests that are using the API and maybe are checking the status codes might start failing. Although, like the status code, this is not an information that the front end would handle it anyway. It's most of the time it's only interested in the content that comes back, so it can render it, etc. But your test will fail, and now you have some maintenance problems, and you need to update all of your tests to what now? Should we still be checking the status code, as it just proved to just break our test and not provide us any value? Or should we just remove all the status code checks altogether? I don't know. So there are things to consider there, and in general, I think it's a good idea to combine those, but you really need to know where to stop yourself from going too deep in a UI test, like too deep going into API, right? You don't want to go too deep into API if your concern is basically just the end-to-end test that just interacts with the application and follows some user flow. Because user is not interested in the status response, it's interested in whether the application is working or not.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like in an end-to-end test, it's not necessarily that you want to limit your scope in an end-to-end test to user interaction and user concern, like what the application looks like and how it functions. And the API, yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, yeah. So now I think, you know, one of the I think what should be also part of the discussion, not our discussion, but you know, a team's discussion when it comes to API testing is the source of truth. You know, when it with regards to the API and the contract, in other words,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to be able to leverage that um, as much as possible. So, in other words, if you have GraphQL and you have types and or like some REST API with an open API spec or something like that, you want to ensure that you're leveraging that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because then what you're going to end up having is a set of tests that really you have to continue to update as the API updates, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if your tests are essentially testing that your source of truth is correct, I don't know if that makes sense. I, like
Or the user
if I
story is
have
correct.
yeah, like if I have a an AP if I have an API spec, right? And that says that, you know, I have these, you know, 30 endpoints, and this is each of what the responses to those endpoints, you know, look like, and you're designing your backend according to that, then really an API test is kind of, I would imagine, maybe kind of pointless, because really all you're doing is just ensuring that documentation is correct, I guess. Um, I
Again,
don't
I
know.
think it depends. Like some of the applications out there are quite data heavy, right? So you get some resource from the server, and it just spits out bunch of data, and you want to show all of that data in the table, right? If you're doing your checks through UI, there's really no point into checking that same data, the same table, the same everything in UI, right? But if you have
Hmm.
something else, right? I don't know what that might be. Maybe a chat application where you only see the message, but then you have bunch of metadata underneath, which might be important because it might, I don't know, like affect something. Authorization might be a good thing, right? So you have a whole group of users, they have different privileges, and they are able to access some data and are not able to access the other data. Like, this is something you
Hmm.
definitely don't want to, like, definitely, that's hard to say, but it might be more effective to test that using API. So if I call this a endpoint, do I get a 403 error as I should, or do I get to see that data? Using that, using
Hmm.
this, doing this through UI, like logging in, checking the page, seeing if you see anything or not, especially if you're not supposed to see something. I think that might be quite an overkill for these cases. Uh,
Yeah, so an API test is a good way to test the data, and then for an end-to-end test, you're just asserting, was this request made? You know, instead of asserting everything on the UI, you can just say, okay, I've asserted that the request is made. I already have a separate API test for this to make sure that the data is there. So my coverage is good. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but that's certainly an approach that I've taken before, is like
yeah.
relying on those API tests or backend tests,
hmm
whatever you want to call it, rather than test everything through the front end.
yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, you want to focus on the risk, and you want to focus on where it's at, but also you want to be effective with your tests. not everything uses an you don't need to use an UI test for everything. Um, we're slowly reaching kind of like our time limit, but we do have a couple of questions, so maybe we could take a look at
Yeah.
that. Sorry, Chow, I've been like ignoring you for quite a long time, but I think we had quite an interesting discussion here. Uh, so regarding the API, Chow is making comment. So says that I did plan to use API test as a way to decompose a long end-to-end test. Once I validate the raw data connection, I plan to move some front-end behavior into component test, and then so I can keep the end-to-end test long and narrow, focused on basic happy path.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be honest, I think you nailed it. I think it's a great way you are looking at it. So you can use the APIs to sort of set up your test, and then like start your test, end-to-end test wherever you want. It's also very good that you keep your end-to-end test, that you're not afraid of making your end-to-end test a little longer, especially if that makes sense in terms of like covering a whole bunch of data and not trying to a whole bunch of part of your application, and not try to like open your application 10 times to basically test 10 different buttons. So I think that's really good. And the fact that you're also like validating your APIs while doing that setup, I think that's a good way of looking at it. Not sure how it fits, how it all fits with the component testing, and whether actual breakdown of something needs to be done. But I guess you know better at this. I probably this is probably something specific to your situation, and cannot really comment on that. But everything else you say makes a whole lot of sense to me, and I think you're heading into a great direction.
Actually, I can I
You have a
I don't know if
nitpick?
no, well, I don't know if this is what you're what Chow is after, but one of the I said earlier, I said, a lot of times I'm saying no with regards to Cypress. What I mean a lot of times is not necessarily Cypress, but end to end. Like I don't want to use end to end to test everything,
Hmm.
and so I push those tests out to other test types like component and API tests, so that I don't have super long tests or tests that are too involved. In other words, a bad end-to-end test, in my opinion, would be one that goes through the application and goes through, it's an app like Amazon. It's a retail e-commerce app, and you're checking out, and in the process of adding something to the cart, you're ensuring that all of the components look exactly like you're asserting CSS, and you're asserting that every little pop up and field is working the way that it should, and it's
Yeah.
the right size and is visible, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's
And then
definitely going
also
too
all of
deep.
the back end stuff, right? Yeah, you're saying, okay, let me make sure that this request is made and assert the response, and that it has this code, and all these other things. And so I would say, okay, this is doing way too much, right? So let's push this out to component tests to test the individual components, in isolation, or even just um, a group of like a form or something instead of a single component, whatever, right? And then all this backend stuff, same thing.
Hmm.
Test it in an API test. So that way the end to end is making assumptions and doesn't test every single thing. And a lot of times, like, especially with something like the example that I gave you with like an Amazon app, well, you're going to do a checkout, but you're also going to have other tests likely that are interacting with those same components and making those same requests. So how do you decide which test is going to make those assertions? So then you have to kind of pick, and then you have to how do you track which components you're testing in which tests and so forth. And so you have a bunch of long tests and you have lots of scattered coverage. It can kind of be a mess. So that's how I interpreted that question in terms of like long end-to-end tests, is just like doing a lot in a single test. But yeah.
All right. I think we're reaching to the end, but we got still one comment from Marcus. And by the way, thank you, Chao and Marcus and Milan, for being active in the chat, for keeping us company. It's always nice to have some sort of interaction, to have some questions, and to like give our 5 cents to to everything. But yeah, Marcus is asking, saying that I often test UI and API together. Is there a problem with intercepting multiple APIs in one spec? I find it helps when using with weights to avoid flake and assert useful API responses. Well, definitely. I mean, this is definitely a good way to use it, and it's no problem for when you are like testing like multiple APIs in one spec, because your application is going to do multiple API calls in just like when you open it, right? Normally there's like a bunch of them running when you just like open it. So I think it's totally okay, and the usage you have here with like avoiding flake, like this is definitely where Cypress shines. You can just wait for that response to come, and but also one use case I found. It was a funny discussion I just had with someone. I don't remember who it was, but basically they had an application that would open and bunch like a ton of API requests, and then we're like, how do I wait for all of them, or how do I make sure I wait for the last one to finish or something? Because if I start my test too early, it's going to fail because I'm trying to find an element, and there's like the spinning wheel that keeps spinning, and I just want to wait for everything to be loaded. And I asked like, all right, so will the spinning wheel disappear when everything is loaded? And they say yes. Well, how about you just use get to get that spinning wheel and make sure it is not visible? And it was like, oh, it's actually easy. So the like intercepting the network calls and waiting for those is definitely useful, and is definitely useful for making the test stable. But sometimes the answer is maybe simpler. Maybe you can just like get the element and make sure it disappears, and give a proper timeout to it so it doesn't fail if your application loads for more than 4 seconds. So yeah.
Yeah. I usually err on the side of asserting everything, asserting all of them, because I want to, because if I know that if there's a problem in the test and it's due to one of those requests not being fired, then it's going to fail earlier, and I'm not going to have some cryptic error to deal with later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it depends on the app and how many requests there really are, and what the risk is and stuff like that.
Yep. All right then. So I guess we are reaching the end. Thanks for everyone who stopped by and listened to us ramble on about Cypress. This was really fun. Thanks everyone for asking questions. Thanks for coming, and I guess we'll see you in about 4 weeks. Looking forward to the next chat.
It's always great. It's always fun. Head over to Discord, and if you want us to review your code, we'd be happy to. So, or if there's any other questions that lingered.
Same here. You can find us on Discord or on social networks, etc. See you next time.
Yep.
Bye everyone.
See ya.